Hello, my name is Ajja and I make psychedelic trance. Just before I started making psychedelic trance, so I played just after the eclipse on the main stage, but it was with a drumming group, a percussion group. Actually, the Australian scene, the way I see it, is changing again, because for a long time it was more progressive stuff here. But back in the days, it was a small group of people that were doing it. I spent part of my childhood in Goa. What I used to do was I'd hook up the drum machines to the synthesizers, which you're not supposed to do because you don't have any note length. You just get these little bloops and bleeps. And I'd start making this weird music, and I really enjoyed it. My first contact with an electronic instrument was I was 14. It was an 808 drum machine. And then when I got back to Switzerland, we started a record Peak Records, which we ran for like quite a long time. And there's Mubali, who was another important one, and he taught us how to put organized chaos into tracks and to shift things around, sort of thing. I listened to everything from super cheesy, housey sort of stuff, like to deep house, to all this sort of thing. The thing is, if you look at it, I've got a Junju project, I've got an unreleased album of that. The Undefined Behavior, we have an unreleased album, except for this one track. Vogon 42, that's me and Dixter, we have an unreleased album. If you've got information, give it to other people, you'll help them, they'll get better, you'll have to get better yourself, because now they're on the same level as you, so you help everybody go up.
It's been a very interesting conversation. Hello everybody from Zenith Gathering 2023, New South Wales, Australia. This is day 2. Brother, please introduce yourself for the viewers who may not know you.
Hello, my name is Ajja and I make psychedelic trance.
And how long have you been doing this, Ajja?
This type of music, around 20 years I'd say. But I've made electronic music before that, and before that I started with rock and funk.
Well, we will talk about that a bit later, but I would like to start by asking you, so it's been 10 years since your previous visit. How many times altogether have you been in Australia?
Actually, this is my 3rd time here. The first time I was here was in 2002. There was an eclipse near Adelaide, and I came to play. It was the Outback Eclipse Festival, but that was just before I started making psychedelic trance, so I played just after the eclipse on the main stage, but it was with a drumming group, a percussion group. So there was 2 friends playing drums, and me, I had a chaos pad and some effects, and that was my entry into big stages in Australia.
So you've kind of been here first time or a long time ago.
Yeah, it was nice. We landed in Adelaide and we stayed at least 3 months, and we bought a Bedford van and we drove around, and we drove all the coast, all through Sydney, all the way up to Byron, and had a great time. Really enjoyed it.
Well, then I guess you're pretty familiar with the Australian music crowd. How would you compare Australian electronic music scene, particularly like the festival and doof scene, compared to other countries?
Actually, the Australian scene, the way I see it, is changing again, because for a long time it was more progressive stuff here, and there was a very specific Australian sound that came out of here that was very nice, and that's what people were into. And last time when I came here 10 years ago, I did have that feeling that I had to adapt what I was playing to keep people interested in a way, sort of thing. I didn't have that feeling at all this time. Maybe it's this particular festival, or maybe it's the crowd, but as I understand it, there's a general shift in consciousness that is going for a more sustained sound, which is...
How do you feel about your set in general?
Oh, I'm amazed that everybody stayed. There was torrential rain pouring down, and people were so brave to stay, and I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. Yeah.
That's awesome. You are performing somewhere else in Australia, or you performed?
I'm playing in Melbourne tomorrow night for the Esoverse. It's a launch party for the Esoteric Festival. And yeah, that's going to be lots of fun because the last time I played here was for Lost the Plot in Melbourne. And the time before that, yeah, like I say, I was experiencing the parties, I wasn't doing the music. So this will be the first time I play inside the city in a club. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's the last gig in Australia on this tour?
Yeah, it's a very mini tour because I don't like to be away from home long. So I came over for the weekend. On Monday I'm going home to see my family again and to make more music.
That's nice. So about music, huh? Before electronic music, you said you had other musical background. So how did your music journey begin and when?
Well, to put it simply, I had smart parents that when I was 9 years old told me I had to pick something artistic. They said that if I knew how to do something artistic, I could always make money with it and earn my living. And that after that, if I wanted to go get a normal job, that was totally up to me, but they wanted to give me tools. So they told me to pick something, and I saw my brothers and sisters, they were all drawing and tattooing, and it looked really hard. So I said music, and I ended up on guitar. And my dad, he was smart, he told me to go play in the streets. So that was not when I was 9, I was 12 when I played for the first time in the streets with an older friend. And that was a very good experience to actually learn that you give energy to people and people return it to you. So it's something that I carry with me through my production, through being on a stage. It's the same feeling I had when I was a kid, is that my job is not to go up there and to play what I want, it's to go up there and exchange energy with people, so it's a beautiful feeling. So yeah, so all through my life I've done a lot of stuff. Started with that, and then I've played in cover bands, I've played bass in a country band for 5 years. Lots of different stuff. And actually electronic music, I spent part of my childhood in Goa. So I encountered it in the late 80s for the first time, and the early 90s. And all of my friends, their dads were DJs and all this sort of stuff, and we were living out there. And I didn't really like it. I thought it's really stupid, but for me, like, there was a definite prejudice that came from knowing the people that were making it and knowing the personalities that were going with it and all this sort of stuff. So it was kind of like I considered it people that tried to make music but they couldn't really do it. But it's funny because years later I came back to it around 2000 and I started making music and like this, and now I go back and I listen to the original stuff and it's really fucking good, So I go there and I realize, shit, these guys were doing this with limited equipment, with all this sort of stuff, and they were putting a lot of heart and soul into it. So it's nowadays it's much more, it's become part of general culture, psychedelic, electronic music, it's all got mixed together. But back in the days it was a small group of people that were doing it, and they put a lot of love and effort into it that I'm only appreciating now. And now I'm asking if I can remix those tracks, and guys like, do you still have? And they're like, no, we don't have it anymore. So I've done a Eat Static remix, like a Green Nuns of the Revolution remix, all this, but I had to work from just the audio files that were there and do my best with it, So it's, yeah.
So what made you decide, like, I want to make electronic music?
Actually, I was making electronic music before because I've always... It's funny, my first contact with an electronic instrument was I was 14, it was an 808 drum machine, but it was my friends, he gave it to me, but me, I was recording guitar songs, rock and blues and stuff. So I used to put this thing on the floor and I used to start it with my foot, so I'd start my guitar playing and then I'd kind of start the drum machine. So no MIDI or anything like that, just that. And the thing that always struck me was I was doing really shitty recordings because it was like on 4-track tapes and not a lot of knowledge, I was 14. But the drums always sounded great. They cut through everything. They always had this really cool sound. And so I gravitated through a bunch of different drum machines, through the Boss ones, the Elises, all this. So that's where my programming knowledge comes from. And then synthesizers came later, and what I used to do was I'd hook up the drum machines to the synthesizers, which you're not supposed to do because you don't have any note length. You just get these little bloops and bleeps. And I'd start making this weird music and then slowing tapes down, playing tapes backwards, doing all this kind of crazy stuff, and still not liking what was psychedelic or techno at the time, sort of thing. And then at some point I had a bit of a crisis in my life. My father was dying and I just split up with my ex-wife, and I wasn't with my son. I was having a really not such a good time, and I was tattooing a friend of mine because I was tattooing at the time as well, and he was a DJ. So I said, look man, I really need to party. Can you help me, take me to a party? So he took me to some of the Swiss parties in the mountains, and I had a really good time. And I listened to this music and I was like, shit, this has evolved a lot. Because from the basic thing that I appreciate now but didn't at the time, suddenly you had computers, more samplers, all this sort of stuff, so people were doing much more interesting stuff, or to me at the time, more accessible, I'll put it that way. So then, I started following the party scene with my mates. That's actually what got me to Australia, was not long after that, because I was traveling around with my mates. We were, partying our tits off, and we went to the pyramids because, we were reading all these strange books in Egypt and all this sort of stuff, and just generally having a good time. And they were like, okay, we're going to Australia, see you. And I'm like, I want to come. They're like, yeah, but, we're going to play music. And I'm like, yeah, I'll play too. And they're like, yeah, but you can't drum. You don't know. I'm like, because I can drum, but not really, So I was like, okay, I'll do electronics, I'll do sound effects sort of thing. And that was coming back into it. And since then, we went there, we went to the Rainbow Serpent, we went to the Exodus Festival. And then when I got back to Switzerland, we started a record label, Peak Records, which we ran for quite a long time. And from there, that was a slow evolution into actually making music and learning how to do this stuff, and a lot of hard work and a lot of getting high in the studio and going, how does this work? Because there wasn't any YouTube, there wasn't any, there wasn't such an exchange of information. And actually there was quite the opposite. People used to keep information for themselves and not really want to share it that much, because it was But that's something that I got from my dad, was that if you've got information, give it to other people. You'll help them. They'll get better. You'll have to get better yourself, because now they're on the same level as you. So you help everybody go up. So it's something that I got a lot of shit from the other guys around 2010, because I started giving away all my presets to people. I was like, guys, look, here you go, make nice music, And they were like, you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, why? They were like, because people have to earn it for themselves and all this. And I was like, no, give it out. So the offshoot is, a lot of people didn't quite understand it, and they just made music that either sounded like me or the preset or whatever. But a bunch of people did do what I was hoping, and they deconstructed it and figured out how to do it and everything, and made their own music with it, But there's been a few important people along the way in my personal music electronic journey. One is Nexus, a guy, Miguel Nexus from Portugal. He was the first guy that showed us how to make an arrangement, how to arrange a track properly. And there was Aaron Ocelot from America. He showed us how to make a kick drum and how to make this FME sort of sound, how to go along that route sort of thing. And there's Mubali, he was another important one, and he taught us how to put organized chaos into tracks and to shift things around sort of thing. So that's how it worked, there's Electric Nose, there's people I worked with along the time, and each time you met somebody, you did learn a particular thing of them that you would incorporate into your own style, so it's a different way of doing it, now. The one thing I noticed is when the pandemic started and everything, and everybody started doing master classes and tutorials and everything, that made another shift in the amount of music coming out and the dilution of individuality into so everybody sounding the same sort of thing. So it's got for and against, but I think that goes for this psychedelic culture in general, because you look at it, before you had techno, you had electronic, you had all this sort of stuff, then it became Goa trance, then psychedelic trance, there's through acid house, all the, lineage, and then now you get psytrance, which is a completely different thing. It's quite a safe sort of, paint by numbers sort of version of it. That's now you have big techno artists, Nina Kravitz, all these sort of people that are playing these tracks, and it's merging more and more. So again, it's good and bad. It's good because it's spreading. It's bad because people are starting to lose the individuality and to lose the point of it. But I still do think that even if you don't, get to the underground, all this sort of stuff. If you encounter commercial psytrance, there is more of a chance that you'll find your way to something more interesting than if you didn't have access to it. So I still think it's good to mix it all up, because it's kind of unavoidable anyway. People like to just share and do stuff.
Makes sense. Yeah. So psytrance has been around for a while now. What do you think about psy techno? Have you listened to much of that, and what do you like it, or what do you think about it?
Yes, I do like it. I'm quite eclectic in the things that I listen to. I listen to everything from super cheesy, housey sort of stuff, like to deep house, to all this sort of thing, all the way the range up to dark psy and beyond into 300 BPM stuff. I think everything's got its time and place, and it is interesting to mix these things to see what you can come up with. I make a lot of it myself, actually. I just don't spread it out. I give it to friends, I give it to DJs, but I don't release it as a project, But I like it, yeah.
The interesting question I have for you. You would be an interesting person to hear your answer. What does progressive mean to you? What does it mean, progressive music? To me, it just doesn't really make sense. I think all music is progressive. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about progressive, which is, it's Tanya, my wife, she always makes a joke about it, is that progressive doesn't actually progress, sort of thing. And for me, that's, if I think about it, that's how I would categorize it in my head, is long, slow evolutions that don't shake you up, that don't go somewhere, that build and build and build and build, and that work in a very long term. It's almost, it gets close to minimal in a way for me, like that. Small changes make a huge difference if you've been staying in the same spot for a long time. So it's another way of playing with people's energy, because for me, that's the name of the game. It's not about what chord you're playing or all this sort of stuff, the way it would be with a guitar or with a violin or with anything like that. You're playing with frequencies and people's emotions and their emotional, mental sort of state, so I have a lot of respect for people that do good progressive, because it's quite hard to actually get something like that where you're gathering this energy to release it, make other release, so I like it, actually, yeah.
So in terms of your current music, what's coming up, or what recently happened? Any upcoming releases that you...
Actually, a couple of releases just a couple of days ago, or yesterday actually. It's just I was traveling, so I wasn't able to promote properly. One is, it's the first track that's been released of a project by me and Burning Noise. It's called Undefined Behavior, and we've made a whole set. We've been playing it. It's really, really good, but we decided to release one track on his album, because he's making an album this year where he releases a track every month. So by the end of the year, you'll have a whole album together. So he asked me if we could use one of these tracks to be the first one. So that's a really good track. And actually that's funny, because that's the first thing me and Gustavo Burning Noise ever did in a studio together, before we even had this Undefined Behavior project, anything. And it's basically a track that was made in about 5 or 6 hours. And then we spent a few years tinkering on and working and refining, and so I'm very happy. It's a track I care a lot about that's coming out. And the other track that also came out yesterday by Synchronicity is it's Modus from Israel. He asked me to do a remix of one of his tracks. Actually, I finished with it here today, it's I really like what he does. He's a very interesting artist, because he gets out of the general sort of psychedelic trance format, psytrancey thing, and he goes back to wobbly basses, which remind me more of the hallucinogen style and this sort of stuff, where it's not based on power, the bass, it's based on flexibility. So I had a really interesting time working with the sounds he gave me, and that's coming out on Stereo Society. That's good. It came out yesterday. Otherwise, I've got so many things that I do that, I mean, since the beginning of the year, I've made an hour of new music, of unreleased stuff. And just now, a few days ago, we finished 5 tracks. Me and Mechanica are making a set together. We've already made 3 tracks that we released, and we thought, okay, we like working together, let's make a set. So he came to my house and we got 5 tracks together really quickly, and now we're shaping them, sort of thing. I was able to play some of them tonight, and they work really well. So that's going to be an interesting evolution, but that'll take a little while longer to get together. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you look at it, I've got a Junju project, I've got an unreleased album of that. The Undefined Behavior, we have an unreleased album, except for this one track. Vogon 42, that's me and Dixter, we have an unreleased album of that. I've got almost an unreleased album of the hour I've made, although that's going to go on compilations, and some of them are collaboration tracks, like I've done one with Iridian that's really good, Ingrained Instincts, that's another one that's good. Jump Street, that's a really good track, a Swiss guy, I quite like him, we work well together. I'm working on one with No Face, one with Om Shanti. I mean, honestly, I've got a list at home. And then there's also the other side of life is that I do chill out and other type of musics. And I've just remixed a track for a guy called Oleg Spies, who has actually been around since the 90s. He was one of the original guys doing this. And he made lots of trance as well, but more chill, or chill floor, I don't know what you'd call it. And that was a very interesting track for me because he's moved into film industry. He started doing soundtracks for The Human Centipede and this sort of stuff, like these sort of movies. So all the sounds he gave me were very cinematic. So I really, really enjoyed doing that. I'm doing a collaboration with Gabrielle Del Mar from the Safi Brothers. Yeah, just lots of stuff actually.
Yeah, well, that's amazing actually. That's it's been a very interesting conversation. And well, so chill out music, is it under the name Ajja or a different artist name?
Generally, I make it under Ajja. I've also made some other a series of stuff that's you can find it on my Bandcamp and all this sort of thing. It's called Guitar Therapy. It's how to put it, when the pandemic started and everybody was locked in their houses, I didn't think it made sense to make psychedelic trance because you didn't want to whip people up, but I thought it was good to give people something to focus on. So I started doing these live streams from my studio. So each one's like from 20 minutes to 40 minutes, they're like long, and they're long, slow evolutions with guitars and bass and a lot of self-made technology because I write my own programs. So I was using all this stuff and testing it out, and people gave me a lot of really good feedback from it because they appreciated the emotion. If we come back to it that way, it was the right emotion for the time for me. So yeah, there's that. I used to work on the chill song, lots of different ones, but generally Ajja I stick to. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, thank you very much for sitting down and talking to me. I wish you all the best, more music. Thank you so much. Any last words you'd like to add?
I would like to add, thank you very much for having me, and I'll be back. I will. I love it here. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you Zenith Gathering for having us all. All the best. Thank you.